I'm going to show you how to take this code pen and turn it into an Elementor widget just like this one over here. Let's get started. I found this awesome code pen online which is called Simple Artistic Button, and it's a really cool hover effect for a button, and I want to turn it into an Elementor widget. So I'm going to show you the process of how I do that. First of all, we're inside of CodePen right now, and to make changes in the HTML and CSS, first of all, I'm going to click the small little button over here which is called Fork. Fork will duplicate the CodePen and make a version that is associated with my account with a link of my own under my username. You can then change the name if you want, but you can always access this from your dashboard. Cool. Now, as you can see, it's made from a different format of HTML. This is not simple HTML and it's not simple CSS. It's SCSS and HAML. So first of all, what we're going to need to do is turn this into regular HTML. So I'm going to click the small little arrow button and click View Compiled HTML. Now it turned it into regular HTML, so I'm going to copy this HTML, and in the settings I'm going to click HTML, and in processor I'm going to click None and save and close. Now I had to copy the HTML after I had the compiled version, and I'm going to paste that in. Now it's regular HTML. The same process we're going to do with the CSS. So click on the arrow, View Compiled. You're going to want to copy everything over here. In the settings, jump into CSS, choose in the processor None, save and close, and replace whatever you had over here with the latest version. Now we're going to jump in and start going over all of the settings inside of the CSS and HTML. The first thing I want to change is that I want instead of a button, I want an A tag, so I can be able to link it with an href. And inside of the widget creator, we're going to make this into a field so people can decide whatever link they want. A button is harder to link between pages, and that's why I've changed it from a button to an A. To this A, I'm going to give an ID. And you know what? Let's wrap this with a div. So I'm going to wrap it with a div. And to the div, I'm going to give an ID. The reason I'm doing it with an ID is because we don't know how many buttons will be on the page, and each button might have different CSS settings, and we don't want the CSS settings to collide. Over here in the CSS, now I'm going to change wherever is written button to A, which is my new tag. Over here, we have one over here, and that's about it. Let's see that we missed this one, which is the hover effect. And okay, there we go. Now we have it. Now, as you can see, once we change this to an A, we have blue color text and then underline. To change that, I'm gonna do color black and text decoration none. This eliminates the underline. So we're almost there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my ID as a selector. So hashtag BTN, and then the A is inside. We're going to add this to wherever we have the A tag. Cool. Now down over here, we have the body settings. I'm going to delete these body settings because I don't want my button to be centered inside of wherever we're going to be working. I mean, we're going to want to have Elementor settings to determine where this button is held. Over here in the button class, I'm going to add display inline block. This will just make this not get cut off or something like that and make the padding affect correctly. Next thing I'm going to do is add a setting for centering the button. So over here, button text align, and I'm going to add center so the button will be centered, and later on we will create this into a dynamic setting and the user will be able to choose center, left, or right. Perfect. So I think we've got everything set up. Let's just look what we have over here. This looks cool. Now over here in the button span, which is inside of the button, there are some settings for the font. Usually I want the font to be determined by the typography setting inside of Elementor. So I'm just gonna take off whatever I think is unnecessary. For example, making all the letters spaced like that is not necessary. Spacing and bold, I think we can take off everything. So now it's like sort of default kind of looking, and I think we can jump into the next steps that we need. Very cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into WordPress and unlimited elements, where my widget creator is. I'm going to jump into the category button widgets, and I'm going to click add widget. The name I'm going to take from here, which is simple artistic button. Click tab to fill in the widget name and click add widget. The widget is over here, it's empty right now. I'm going to double click on it and jump into the HTML. Over here I'm going to copy my HTML and paste that, and I'm going to copy my CSS and paste that in as well. Looking good. Next step is I'm going to replace my static ID into a dynamic ID. So first of all, I'm in the HTML. I'm going to select the ID and click UCID on the right side. This populates a dynamic ID. Inside of the CSS, we need to replace all the places where we have the static ID into a dynamic ID. Looking good. Perfect. Now we're going to start creating settings and attributes that the user will be able to edit. Inside of the HTML, the first thing is the text and the link. So I'm just gonna select this text over here, jump into attributes and click add attribute. Over here in the title, I'm going to add a name for the field. So it's going to be button text, and I'm going to place that in the value over here. Click add attribute. Inside of the HTML, going to replace the span over here with the button text. Same thing I'm going to do for a link. Click add attribute. In attribute type, I'm going to select link. I'm going to call it button link. And in the default value, I'm going to put hashtag. Inside of the HTML, replace the hashtag with button link. And after this href closes, I'm going to add space and paste in the button link attributes. Perfect. So I think we're almost done with all the button attributes that we've needed. Now we're going to add style attributes. So in the CSS over here, we have alignment, which is a text align. I'm going to jump into attributes, add attribute, and create a drop-down field. The drop-down field, I'm going to call this alignment. And over here, we'll give it some options. So the first option will be center. The second option will be left to align it to the left. And the last option will be right. Cool. I'm gonna click update to save. Before I continue, I'm just gonna test that everything's working. So add a new page inside of pages. And over here, what we're going to do is click edit with Elementor, just to quickly test this and see how it looks. Once the widget pane is fully loaded, I'm going to search for my widget, which is simple artistic button. Let's give that a couple seconds to load. Perfect. Searching for simple artistic button, and I'm gonna drag that inside. Here we go. Let's test this. If I change the text over here, it changes over here. If I change the alignment, I see the alignment is not changing. So let's check what I've missed. I'm going to jump back into the editor. Inside of CSS, we need to replace this static CSS with the new attribute we've created. So it's really important to jump between the different views and just QA yourself to see that you haven't forgot or missed anything. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give an option to edit the border. I'm going to split this into 3 different fields. It's going to be border color, border width, and border style. So first of all, let's write them as static. Border width is going to be 4 pixels. Border style will be solid, and border color will be black. After I split it into 3 separate fields, I'm going to delete the first one, and now let's start creating the attributes. So for border, let's start with border color, which is the simplest. I'm going to add an attribute, a color picker attribute. I'm going to call it border color and give it a default value. Let's go for black. And inside of the CSS, I'm going to replace the static black with the new dynamic field. For border style, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a drop down and call it border style. Over here, let's select solid, and I'll give 2 more options. One is going to be called dashed, and the third one will be dotted. Perfect. Looking good. Jump into the CSS and replace the word solid with the dynamic attribute. For border width, I'm going to use a slider attribute, but before I do that, I need to give a class to my A tag over here in the HTML. So I'm going to add a class, and I'm going to give that a name. Just going to give it the same name as we did over here in the widget name, and paste that in over here. We might need to reuse this a couple of times, so I'm just going to copy that. And over here in the attributes, I'm going to click add attribute, add a slider field, turn on responsive controls, call this button border width, and over here we can give it a default value. 20 is too much, let's go for 4. And you can give it different values for tablet or mobile if you want. And in the CSS selector, I'm going to click dot. Dot is the selector for class in CSS, and paste the name of the class that I gave before. Over here in the CSS selector value, I'm going to change this from width to border width, which is exactly what value I want to change, and click add attribute. Inside of the CSS, we can take off the border width that we have over here. And as you can see, this is actually a different way of working. So before we actually inserted these styles inside of the CSS over here. And the new way that we're working with the border width is with a CSS selector. So those are two different ways to work. Over here, let's refresh the page and see what's happening. Cool, so now you can see the button is aligned to the left. So it means that the attribute that we've added for alignment is working correctly. Let's give this a couple of seconds to load and check out all the border settings that we've added. Perfect, so I've clicked on my widget and now I see all the new settings. Let's check them out. Change the border to a different color, maybe sort of bluish. Cool, this is working. Change the border style to dashed. Cool, it's working. And the border width is a slider, which you can play around with, which is really awesome. Cool. So everything here is set up. Let's align this back to the center. And I think we're almost done. Let's see what we have left. So over here inside of the CSS, let's find the yellow background, which I think it's this after tag. So I'm going to copy this color and I'm going to call it button background. Of course, you need to change over here to color picker, and I'm going to paste in the value inside of the CSS. Let's replace this with the new setting, which is button background. Now you can also change that. Let's see what else we have and might need to change. I think this is great. So I see we have an offset for the kind of background, and it's doing it with these settings over here. So it's like, this is on the hover, it's moving it -10 and -10, and before hover it's moving it +10 and +10. So maybe we can make an attribute for the offset. So background offset, I'm gonna call it. And over here, let's make it a number attribute. The default is going to be 10. We do want it to be responsive. Anything that you can, I suggest you make responsive. And that's about it, I think. So we have a default value. We don't need a minimum and maximum. And inside of the CSS, wherever we have the value 10, we can replace that with offset, background offset. And over here we have 5 different places. Background offset, background offset, background offset, and I think this is the last place. I hope I didn't miss anything, so let's save that. I think in the attributes I'm going to turn it off. I don't want the responsive settings, so let's do that and refresh over here. Let's give this a couple of seconds to load and just go over everything and see if we didn't miss anything. Oh, I think we need a background offset over here as well. So I'm just going to save that and refresh over here. Oh, so we have padding. This is the last field that I'm going to want to add. So to add that, I'm just going to click Attributes, Add Attribute, add a padding field, call it button padding, and give it some values. This I do want to be responsive. Let's jump into the CSS. So it's 16 and 24. We can delete this, go into attributes, and let's do 16, 24, 16, 24. You don't need to fill in the tablet and mobile. This can be filled in by whomever wants to override the desktop settings. And in the CSS selector, I'm going to copy my CSS class that I used earlier and paste it with a dot over here. Cool, I think everything is set up. Let's click on our button just to see if the offset is working. So I'm going to make a bigger offset. Cool, that seems to be working. And let's click update and refresh just to see the padding. You see now the padding isn't working at all because I've added it in parallel to refreshing the page earlier. Cool, now the padding I see is working and the offset is really 20, which looks kind of awesome. Let's give this a couple of seconds to load and we're going to wrap this tutorial up. Another thing that you might want to do is make a thumbnail for your widget. If you'll go over here to back to widget list, you'll see that it doesn't have a thumbnail. To make a thumbnail, what you need to do is make a print screen. So you can just print screen this. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to call it preview. Perfect. Let's click on the button just to check it out. Over here we have the padding and you can play around with that. That will make it larger. We can play around with the setting to make it smaller. And I think we're about done. I mean, this looks awesome. The last thing that I forgot to do is maybe add some typography settings. So let's do that as well. Jump back into the widget, double click, attributes, add attribute. I'm gonna search for typography. I'm gonna call it button typography. And in the CSS selector, I'm gonna put dot and my name that I had earlier. Let's take it from here. Attributes, paste that in. Update. Meanwhile, I'm going to click over here and refresh. And let's upload our image, our preview image. So before I upload it, what I'm going to do is I need to create a folder inside of the Assets tab. So I'm going to click Create Folder, put in the name that we've used earlier. Click Create Folder. I'm going to search for it, so I'm just clicking Control F, Command or Control F, and paste it in the regular search over here. Click on it once and scroll up. Over here you can see Widget Assets Path not set. So now we want to set this new folder, so I'm going to click Set, and I'm going to click Upload. Select the preview image that we've uploaded earlier. And this needs to have a specific name. You can see the names inside of General. You can see that it needs to be called Preview Add-on. It could be a JPEG, a PNG, or a GIF. So let's click on it and rename. Call it Preview Add-on, rename. Let's jump into the HTML, see that we didn't miss anything, CSS, and we're going to wrap this up. Let's just look at our new typography setting. You can see you can play around with the size and the font family, all the stuff that we've deleted earlier from our CSS. Now we can use them. You even have letter spacing like they suggested you have. Make the padding smaller, make the button border style to solid, and play around with this as much as you want. I think this is starting to look really awesome and have a lot of settings where you can affect whatever you want. It's a really cool customized widget for your clients. Let's go into typography and make it uppercase. Awesome. Really cool. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you enjoyed, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.